I'm April Morley. I'm co-founder of Genius Drive and the Enterprise Value Collective.
And I'm Tom Pacello, the ROI guy.
This podcast is a service of the Enterprise Value Collective, a community for business value-focused leaders and practitioners, and is sponsored by our value consultancy, Genius Drive.
Our mission is to help accelerate and optimize the value articulation in each of your customer engagements and throughout your customer lifecycle, and help us understand the best practices in that. We've got Dr. Jeff Collins. He's a 15-plus year value veteran, and he's currently the Senior VP leading the value program and delivery for the business spend management firm, Coupa Software. Welcome, Jeff.
Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah, when I first got involved and had the honor of working with Coupa, it was just before the book Value as a Service was released. Your CEO, Rob Bernstein, came out with that book. And it really was a game changer. Can you define what value as a service means to you?
Yeah, I think for me, and this is really, I think, what separated Coupa's approach to the delivery of business spend management software was we weren't so focused on feature function. I think a lot of technology companies tend to be hyper focused on feature function. We were really focused on measurable business value. Rob used to say that if one of our customers, if they couldn't measure the impact of Coupa on their business, they probably shouldn't have invested in the technology. So value as a service is more than just sort of a slogan. It was a commitment to deliver measurable business value for our customers, so that when and being in the ROI business, right? It's one thing to generate an ROI; it's another thing to deliver on the promise of an ROI. And Rob's commitment to our customers was that we were going to deliver. We weren't just going to promise an ROI; we were going to deliver an ROI.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, it's really the ultimate support to have the CEO on board with any initiative. I'm really curious, what that experience was like for you when you were coming back to the organization and there was a book out about value as a service. Like, what impact did that have on you and the team?
So there are a lot of organizations that throw the word value around. And it almost becomes meaningless in many organizations. They just say value this, value that. And the commitment to measurable business value, that this was going to be in our DNA, meant that the organization was more than just a nice to have. We weren't just we have some guys that can help you build a business case, right? It was really a commitment to maximizing customer lifecycle value. And that's transformative, right? It's not a sales motion. It is really a transformational motion to help be partners to build our customers' businesses.
Yeah. The book was
released. Did you experience that the customers responded to that as well? Because like you said, it's transformational. So it made a difference for the internal stakeholders. But what difference did you see in the customer's experience?
Yeah. So I think a lot of people have been sold to. I mean, in fact, everybody's been sold to. We bought cars, right? We know what that feeling is like. And when you come in and you, I think, sell to someone, there is a relationship that is not necessarily the optimal relationship. It's not a partnership. It's a sales relationship and a customer relationship. But when you commit to the delivery of value, it changes the nature of that relationship, right? The selling motion ultimately ends up in the commodification of whatever it is you're trying to sell to the customer. But when you're a partner, what you're actually saying is, we're going to come in and we're going to help you run your business better. We're going to commit to delivering, again, measurable business value. More importantly, though, as partners, we're going to continually to improve each other's business. So it isn't a unidirectional relationship. It's a bidirectional relationship where the customer is saying, look, you're helping us here, but you could do better. We could do better and in our case, technology, if the technology delivered these sorts of outcomes, we would be even better off. And so then they become really innovation partners, and it's the kind of relationship that you want to foster that unfortunately doesn't happen as often as I think we would all like to see it happen.
Yeah, and I could remember visiting the offices, Jeff, and just seeing the book everywhere. And it would be handed to you when you walked in and you registered. And it really did become a part of that DNA on engagement. And it was 2016. I think it was pretty revolutionary for a CEO to come up and says, look, we don't exist unless we're delivering true, quantifiable value to our customers. And I think Rob was going out on a pretty big limb with that. And like, we don't deserve to exist without it, I think is something that he said in the book.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I think my experience at Coupa has been, I hope it's not unique, but I think it probably is unique in that from the very beginning, we were committed to delivering measurable value that you could see in a P&L. Our CEO, as you said, was committed. He was so committed, he wrote a book, and then he followed up, by the way, with another book. If you don't have that, I'd
I
happy to
don't
send
have
it to
that
you.
one. Yeah.
Yeah, and what the other part of this that I think you can't discount is the impact it had on our culture.
Yeah.
And ensuring customer success became one of their sort of three things that we, corporate values, if you will. But ensuring customer success was first and foremost what we were there to do. And success was defined in that our customers, again, had to be able to realize the value of their investment. And that the only way to do that is by having, again, business impact and being able to see it in a P&L.
Yeah. And as we looked at the program that you created to support this big vision and goal, so I think in one way it gave you that executive support that, some would say they have, but few to the level that Rob gave you as the CEO. But it also put a lot of pressure on the group to do things differently. It wasn't just, okay, here's a business case service and we'll set it up to quantify the business value. It was different. So I want to go through and talk about some of the elements of the value program that you created to support value as a service that I think were a little bit different. One of the things right off the bat was it wasn't about the numbers. It was about the story that those numbers told. And storytelling to me was so prominent and something that we don't see. A lot of times we get handed a model and say, okay, we're doing value. Here's our spreadsheet model. And it's a whole bunch of numbers and, it's good that it's quantified, but it doesn't tell the story. Talk about the storytelling element of what you created.
Yeah. I started as an academic, right? And I was an economics professor, and I taught at a Southern university. And I grew up in the West, and my parents were from the Midwest, and we were sort of, get to it, tell us what you want to tell us. And then you go to the South, and everything's a story, right?
Mm-hmm.
That you don't immediately, in fact, it's almost rude to just jump into it.
Mm-hmm.
And that sort of art of storytelling becomes really important because it contextualizes the numbers. And anybody, and I've heard this from customers, when you first start interacting with them, like, yeah, we've got business cases. We've seen business cases. We've seen ROIs. We've seen it. And they're right. They have, right? Everybody has a shelf filled with 3-ring binders of business cases that were delivered to them. They put them on the shelf and nothing ever happened.
Mm-hmm.
So when you come in order to differentiate yourself, which, is how you win, you have to be able to contextualize the why Coupa, and it's the classic, why do anything? Why do it now? Why do it with Coupa?
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the commitments we made is to say, we're going to start out with, what is it as a business you're trying to achieve?
Mm-hmm.
And people would say, well, we want to process invoices faster. But why?
Mm-hmm.
What is that? What does processing invoices faster get you? And I said, well, right now we can't take advantage of negotiated early payment discount terms with our customers. And go, okay, so why is that important? Well, it frees cash. It frees cash. Why do you want the free cash? Oh, we want the free cash because we're growing through acquisition, and we want to make sure that we have sufficient capital in order to acquire companies, in order to build our top line, right? And diversify our revenue streams and blah, 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 blah. So if you start, so again, if you just build a business case, hey, we want to process invoices faster, you would begin and end with there's an efficiency play and there's an effectiveness play. You're going to get some early payment discounts. You might extend days payable outstanding, and you're also going to reduce the amount of time it takes. So maybe reduce the effort, and some businesses even want to reduce heads. So that's the nuts and bolts. That's the numbers part of that conversation. But then, and this is one of my favorite anecdotes from working with our customers is working with Walmart. And we were building a business case with Walmart, and not surprisingly, they're a big company, so the value was quite substantial. Right? But even though it's a big number, it would be a massive number to the three of us on this call. When you look at Walmart, they're like, it's a rounding error. They probably spend that dollar amount that we were going to save them in buying Christmas tree lights every year just in the United States, right? So is it a big number? It's a big number, but is it really a big number? So you have to translate that, going back to your story idea, you have to translate that into something that's meaningful to them. So what we did is we looked at the annual profitability of their stores. What is the annual profitability of a store? And then you take the number, right, and you divide it by the annual profitability, and you get the number of new stores they would have to open in order to realize that bottom line impact. That translates the number into something that's meaningful, because they know how difficult it is to open new stores. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Absolutely.
That makes a lot of sense. I guess it depends on what you compare it to, whether or not it's a large number. So I love that example of really comparing it to something that makes it real. So I think you had talked about, you had in the past that you had leveraged automation and really worked to improve it over time. I'd love to hear more about that process.
Yeah. So I want to go back to something that Tom said earlier around the I wish I could remember exactly how you put it, but I think you implied there was sort of pressure, right? And I never thought of it as, I have not thought during my career at Coupa being under pressure to perform. What I've seen is the permission to be entrepreneurial.
Awesome.
And that has been, I think, liberating, right? So to your point, April, about automation, early on, probably 4 years into my career at Coupa or so, had only been supporting the global team for maybe a year and a half. We had been taking customer data, and because the reality is in the data. You translate that into a story, as we talked about before, but the reality is in the customer data. And we were getting very massive data files, sometimes multiple files that we had to collate. And I mean, I'm pretty good in Excel, but once you get a file that's beyond the capabilities of Excel, I needed help. And so we put together a business case for a data analysis team, and walked into Rob's office, sat down in front of him, and said, "This is what we want to do." And in about 5 minutes, we'd only been pitching for about 5 minutes, because you pitch. And he goes, "I get it. It's a great idea. Go do it." So he gave us budget. We went and started hiring people, and we started taking data. Now, in order to scale that organization, we had to automate. And so what we've been doing, and this has been ongoing, this isn't something we did 5 years ago or 2 years ago. It's something we're continuing to do every day, is think about how can we automate those processes in order to deliver our insights to the field as quickly as possible. One of the types of analyses that we automated, or we're in the process of re-automating, is something called the supplier match. So in our game, right, our customers, when they want to know, what's the probability of my success, not just what the ROI is, what's the probability of realizing the ROI. I often talk about a risk-adjusted real rate of return on an investment in Coupa. Part of the probability of succeeding comes from whether or not the suppliers that they have are familiar with Coupa, or interacting with Coupa in some way. So when we take customer data, we get these large data files. And then what we do is we run them against a reference database of all the suppliers that are in Coupa. Now, as you can imagine, those those companies that are customers, they might have IBM, I period, B period, M period, all lowercase, I period, B period, M period, all uppercase. They could have, I don't know, the name written out. There's dozens of ways that these suppliers can be in any given customer's supplier master.
Mhm.
So what we had to do is create automation, because it's very tedious to go through and go, oh, that's IBM.
Mhm.
We had to create automation that said, we've seen IBM 20 different ways. These are all the ways we've seen it. And then when you automate to run the reference, you look at what it looks like in the customer's data file and say, oh, we're pretty sure we have a 90% probability with 90% sort of certainty that whatever it is, IBM is actually IBM that we've seen before. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But if you had to just rely on person hours to do that, it could be a very laborious process. So what we've done is written scripts in Python that run the customer's data against these reference databases to automate that process. And then we can go into a customer and say 65, 70% of your suppliers are already interacting with Coupa. Moreover, we can tell you how they interact with Coupa. And that's very powerful information that fleshes out the whole story of why Coupa.
Yeah, and is using their specific data to do it. A couple of other areas where I know you've leveraged data. One is you publish an index of the value delivered, and the cost of doing nothing and the value delivered, and that's kind of a quarterly. I think it's a quarterly industry report. If not, I don't know if you do it annually or quarterly.
Yeah, let me. Yeah, there's sort of two things. I think you're a bit on both. So let me talk about two things. The first thing we do is we publish an annual benchmark report, which talks specifically about how our best-in-class customers are performing against a set of common sort of KPIs, about 20 KPIs, I think. What's interesting about that is that, that's something that we publish that's consumed sort of widely globally. We can also do the same sort of benchmarking exercise at the industry level and then at a peer group level. Mm-hmm. So it really goes very granular, down to a very granular level in terms of, what are Coupa's best in class customers at the industry level or the peer level achieving. But we do another thing, and I think this is what you're really getting at. It's something called the Business Spend Index, which as a former academic economist and now someone who's fortunate enough to work with a lot of data, it really excites me. And what that allows us to do, the Business Spend allows us to do, is if you understand what Coupa does, we facilitate buying, and within businesses, that buying process takes time, right? So you begin with a purchase requisition. It ultimately, after approvals, becomes a purchase order. It goes to a supplier. The supplier has need time to fulfill, and then there's delivery time. So it can be 2-3 months before somebody expresses demand for something, and until that invoice actually shows up, and then another 30 days till the invoice is paid. If you think about what GDP is, it is the aggregate of all those paid invoices, right? At least in part, on the business side.
Yeah,
we see the expression of demand 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months before it actually finds its way into GDP. So what we're able to do is provide a leading economic indicator, sort of a near casting model that says, hey, based on what we're seeing and how that behavior is different than what it was last quarter or the quarter before or the quarter before that, we think GDP is going to go up or it's going to go down. And then we actually estimate what we think the percentage change is going to be in GDP. And so that is, I think, a very cool example of what's possible if you have information and, again, the freedom to be entrepreneurial. I mean, this idea came from Rob. Actually, Rob said, we have great data, why can't we do something like this? And we said, well, we can. Let's figure it out. And we did, and it's been very exciting.
Yeah, ADP has an index like that on the payroll side. You guys have it on the spend side, and I think that's awesome. And it's the economist in you that's wanting to break out. I totally love it. Another data point, or another way to leverage the data that you're doing on the marketing and outreach side that I absolutely think is brilliant, that many business value groups don't do, pro forma business cases. You're able to, with a little bit of profile information about a company, proactively prepare a business case, do it for dozens, hundreds of companies, and outreach with it proactively, a kind of summarized pro forma report that says,
Mhm.
here's where we think you're at and what it's costing you as a business, and here's what we think you can impact. Call us.
Yeah. Yeah. That again, it goes to something, April asked about in terms of automation. And um, w- again, by leveraging the data that are in Coupa, we have been able to sort of understand at the industry level, given say market segments, so small companies, sort of corporate level, mid-market companies, and then very large companies, based on the industry they're in, what categories do they purchase? And we have some idea of how Coupa impacts those categories. We have idea what are the optimal buying channels for those categories. We have some idea of if you were to source those categories, how much savings you would achieve. And so because we have that visibility, we can take a company that we don't have their data, but we have some idea of what the likely distribution of spend is across categories and in terms of quantity, and then how we would impact that. And through that knowledge, we can, in an informed way, it's never perfect because that would require actually understanding what their spend looks like, and there is variation, but we can say something intelligent about how we think Coupa could impact their business.
Love it.
And that's really entree. It begins the value conversation up front, right? Because they understand how we think about value, how it's going to be measured, what KPIs are going to be impacted. And then from that conversation, then we start the journey with them and we start to really refine our understanding. You could go in and you could say, look, we think you have spend across these categories, one of which is legal services. And they'll say, it would be great if we could put legal services through Coupa, but our legal team would never let it happen. And we go, oh, okay, well, we should probably omit that then. But then we can talk about what about these other categories. So it becomes again, the entree into an ongoing conversation about the delivery of value. And then what happens is post-implementation, as you continue to work with the customer to help them work their way up the maturity curve, you can start to say 2 years down the road, go back and say, well, remember we talked about legal services. Is that still politically impossible to address? Or are you guys ready to start thinking about how you would actually put legal services? And then we can talk about how that works with other customers. What do best practices look like? And you really start to facilitate this ongoing incremental delivery of value. But it begins at the very front of the relationship.
Oh, such a great opportunity to start the relationship on the right foot of value and keep it going throughout the life cycle. So Jeff, what is the one piece of advice that you'd like to leave the Enterprise Value Collective with today?
The advice I would give you is that in my experience, the constant striving to tell a better story, to be more data oriented, more specific, has yielded massive benefit to Coupa and to our customers. It's one thing to go in and do sort of the thumb in the air and say, well, we think there's X, give or take, right? It's another thing to form a partnership and have it be rooted in the customer's reality. That's what I would say is constantly strive, innovate to tell the best story you possibly can.
Such great advice, Jeff. Thank you so much for joining us on the Value Coffee Talk podcast.
Yeah, Jeff, and thanks so much. I think you said it right in terms of the actual data. And one of my favorite things that we didn't get to talk about, maybe we could do it on a subsequent podcast, is the big checks that your customers hold up in their success stories. What a great way for them to convey the value and to stand behind it. I just think that's brilliant.
It has been very fulfilling to be part of Coupa. And, we started out talking about how we are constantly changing and transforming. I can't wait to see what comes next. I'm very excited about the future.
Us too. And we can't wait for you to share it. And so we can learn from some of the best practices. If you haven't done so yet, please sign up for the Enterprise Value Collective. Do that on LinkedIn, geniusdrive.com website. Stay in touch with us on the latest events, tools, insights. And on the podcast, Hit the like button if you like what Jeff had to say. Definitely subscribe so you can be notified when the latest episodes are posted. And until next time, our Enterprise Value Collective, let's keep sharing and growing together.